All right, let's get right into it. We're looking at late January 2026, and the world is holding its breath, watching this high-stakes standoff with Iran that just feels like it's about to boil over. Tensions are ratcheting up, military pieces are moving on the board, and the language being used, it's getting really, really heated.
And then the pressure just skyrocketed when the White House used this very specific, very loaded word, armada. I mean, that's not just casual talk, right? It's a deliberate signal of a massive military presence, and it puts absolutely everyone in the region on high alert.
And this is where we see the really dangerous disconnect. On one side, you have analysts saying there is a very real risk of a U.S. military strike. But on the other, Iran is making it crystal clear. You can't talk about diplomacy with a gun to our head. It's this impossible situation that's just forcing both sides further and further apart.
So the big question is, how on earth did we get here? How did we end up right back on the brink of another potential war in the Middle East, with both sides seemingly locked on a collision course?
Well, to really get a grip on the external confrontation, we actually have to look inside Iran first. There is an immense crisis that's been building for months, and it's pushed the regime into a very, very tight corner.
So starting back in December 2025, organizations like JINSA started tracking these huge nationwide protests against the regime. And the trigger for all of this? A complete and catastrophic economic collapse that has driven millions of ordinary people into the streets.
The human cost of the government's crackdown has been just staggering. We have human rights groups confirming over 6,000 deaths. And that number might just be the start. There are claims of thousands more that are still being investigated. And look at the arrests, it's even higher. We're talking about more than 40,000 people detained. That number alone gives you a chilling idea of the scale of these protests and the brutality of the response. And if you listen to what people are chanting in the streets, you realize this is something different. These aren't just pleas for economic help. These are direct challenges to the very top, to the supreme leader himself, and to the powerful Revolutionary Guard. This is fundamental. And here's the kicker. The situation inside Iran is so bad that even former government officials are saying the window for talks has basically slammed shut. They believe a military conflict isn't just possible anymore, it's actually probable. But you might be thinking, we hear threats all the time. Why is this one being taken so seriously? What makes everyone think this isn't just political posturing, that this could actually turn into a real shooting war? Well, the answer is in our very recent memory. Something happened less than a year ago that changes everything about how we see today's threats. It gives this whole crisis an intense feeling of déjà vu. Back in June of 2025, the U.S. launched a massive attack called Operation Midnight Hammer. And this was no small raid. We're talking stealth bombers, bunker buster bombs, and cruise missiles hitting Iran's 3 most critical nuclear facilities. Now, here's where it gets complicated. After the strikes, the White House claimed it was a huge success, that Iran's nuclear program was set back by years. But then, a leaked intelligence report painted a totally different picture, suggesting the delay was only a matter of months. This debate over how effective that last strike really was is exactly why the threat of a new one is so incredibly tense. So, with the memory of that recent attack fresh in everyone's minds, it begs the question, what would another round of strikes actually mean? What are the potential shockwaves for the rest of the Middle East and for the rest of us?
So let's zoom out and look at how the rest of the world is reacting. Because Iran's neighbors and the other big global players, they aren't just watching this on TV. They're actively getting ready for the worst.
Iran's Gulf neighbors are in a really tough spot. They're terrified of the global economy tanking if oil supplies are disrupted. They're worried about retaliatory attacks on their cities, about the chaos that would follow a regime collapse in Tehran, and even about a massive refugee crisis that could completely overwhelm them. And that anxiety is so real that key American allies like the UAE are already drawing red lines. They've publicly said their territory cannot be used as a staging ground for an attack on Iran. Now that's a huge deal, and it really complicates any potential U.S. military planning. Meanwhile, you've got Russia, and they have a tried and true playbook for these situations. Step 1, they'll loudly condemn the U.S. at the United Nations. Step 2, they'll quietly help Iran behind the scenes with things like intelligence. And Step 3, they'll use the chaos as an opportunity to push their own agenda. It lets them poke the West without much risk to themselves. And this quote just hits the nail on the head.
It perfectly captures the reality for Iran or any of Russia's allies. Moscow's support is always conditional. They'll help you stir the pot, but they will not get into a direct fight with the United States for you.
So all of this, the protests inside Iran, the history of recent strikes, the fears of the neighbors, it all comes together and boils down to one critical choice that everyone is facing right now.
And the signals we're getting could not be more mixed. On the one hand, you hear whispers that messages are still being passed back and forth, that there might be some kind of deal that could be a diplomatic off-ramp. But on the other hand, you can literally see the military hardware moving into place, and the public threats are pointing straight toward a collision.
The whole situation is just an absolute powder keg. You've got internal revolution, the memory of a recent war, and deep, deep anxiety across the globe. With the stakes this high, it leaves the world asking, which path will be chosen? Is there any way to pull back from the brink, or are we about to watch a devastating new conflict unfold?